Hey there, I'm Juliano, and today I'm going to teach you how to play something really cool on guitar. So a lot of you have probably seen, I put out a cover recently. I did a Rockabilly cover of the Billie Eilish song Bad Guy, and today I'm going to teach you how to play the entire song on guitar. Let's first talk about the tone you need. This Gretsch guitar definitely helps having a hollow body. A lot of the big Rockabilly tunes, all the guys are using these Gretsch hollow body guitars, so I figured this was the appropriate instrument to use. I have two Brian Setzer signature TV Jones pickups in there, so they got a cool kind of twangy sound, especially in the middle position, which I use the middle position the entire song. That's the kind of bass tone of it. So this is the full thing, and then I'll break it down. So you got the So you hear there's kind of a lot going on there. So let me break it down a little bit. So I'm using kind of three different sounds here. So this is just the complete clean sound on the amp. It's going to be a little bit quieter. So first is going into an MXR Dynacomp for a little bit of compression, a little bit of boost. Then I have it going through an exotic EP booster just to give it a little bit more power, a little bit more gain. That's with it on, this is with it off. Just kind of fatten it up, a little bit more distortion. And then the kind of key to the real Rockabilly sound is the slapback echo. So this is without it, this is with it. Because you can kind of hear it gives it a little bit of that. I like it because it gives it that like push that it needs. Versus it's kind of dry and kind of boring. So the typical Rockabilly sound is getting that really quick delay sound, the really slapback delay. You can hear like, so that's the bass tone of this. And then I'm coming through my Fender Twin Reverb, cranked to about a little over 5. You know, it's just starting to break up a little bit. So then you kick it a little bit harder with some of these pedals, and it gives you that nice kind of light drive sound. That's pretty good for Rockabilly. So now let's talk about the intro. And here's the intro. So let's first talk about our basic chord progression here. Your main chords for this entire song are basically 3 kind of 4 chords. It's going to be G minor 7, C minor 7, D7, and then D7 flat 9. I'll play it just kind of the chords as it is, and then we'll break it down to how I actually play it. So So you're kind of basic, you know, I'll just outline the chords for you that I'm kind of using a lot of the time. So the G minor 7 is just your typical G up top, and then bar the D, G, and B strings at the 3rd fret. You can even grab the G up top too, like I do sometimes. And then the C minor 7 is going to be your typical, just right here, the 3rd fret. D7 I kind of just do as like a triad, so I do the D on the 5th fret of the A string, F sharp on the 4th fret of the D string, and then the C at the 5th fret of the G string. And then for the D7 flat 9, all you do is bar the 4th fret and get this note here, the 4th fret of the B string. So it gives it that kind of cool dissonant sound. So for the intro, I'll play the first couple chords of it so you can see. So on G minor 7, I do this kind of like strum sliding up. So what I'm doing there is I start with just the typical G minor 7 triad here, although there's no 7. And then I like outlining the 9 a lot, so I hit the A on the 5th fret here of the E string. And then go back. Then what I like to do is I like climbing up the voicings of the chords. So here's your next voicing of G minor 7. So we start here, go here, and then you'll end up here. So these are all they're all G minor. So the full thing with this, you have the little kind of notes in between. So and then come back up here. Then we'll get the 7 in there. That's the 13th fret of the high E string. And then, so that's our whole G minor section. And then next is the C minor 7 part. That's easy, that's just, and then just bouncing on the 2 notes here on the high E string. Because like I said, I like outlining the 9 on minor chords because it sounds really cool. So altogether up to that point. And then the last part is the D7. So you're going to want to hit the 11th fret of the G, 10th fret of the B, 8th fret of the E. That's kind of like a fun way to break down your 7 chords. So this is like your typical D triad. You grab the C back here. That creates the D7. So this is also, you know, you'll see I use this a lot. It's a common way to play a diminished chord too. But with the D, it's just a D7. So that next part, what I do is this. So that's where I take advantage of the kind of diminished sounding tonality. So after the C, so I kind of do like a cool slide up there. So those last 2 voicings are this. You do 11th fret of the G, 10th fret of the B, 11th fret of the high E, and then you bring that whole thing up 3 frets. Because the diminished chords, they're all the same every 3 frets. You know, like, it's just like one of those cool music things you can just do all the time. So I took advantage of that a lot of times. You'll keep seeing throughout this. So that's the whole intro. So I'll play it one time. I'll play it once again. So that's the whole intro. Now let's talk about the verse. And here's the verse.
White shirt, now red, my bloody nose sleeping. You're on your tippy toes creeping around like no one knows. Think you're so criminal. Bruises on both my knees for you. Don't say a thank you or please. I do what I want when I want to. My soul so cynical. So you're a tough guy.
So the verse is pretty straightforward. Still follows the same kind of chord progression we would be dealing with. That's really the whole song. So, you know, you're kind of used to the typical rock and roll thing like the... So I did a little bit of a, I don't know, variation of that, let's say, for the verse. So our whole thing is going to be this. So all I'm doing is your typical G power chord here. And all I'm doing is going back and forth between, on the top E string, between the 3rd and 6th frets. So that's kind of like a whole thing. I'll do that on the C chord too. So this is the way I played it. So there's the, just got to grab those nice, those up top, nice upstrokes. So the first time I do 2, the second time I do 1, right before going to the C chord. So you'll see that I went, you know, I slid up to the 8th fret to get the C chord. I do the same thing. I grab these top 3 strings here. Really, you got to get it really aggressively to kind of really nail that. And then when I move to the D7, all I'm doing is like a bit of a hybrid picking thing. So I'm picking the A string, and then with my middle finger and pointer finger, I'm grabbing the D and G string. So So you kind of got to get used to that if you haven't done a lot of hybrid picking. But it's a fun thing to do. I do it a lot in this song. I do it a lot whenever I'm playing like a rockabilly style. So that's, you know, when I get to the D7, that's what I'm doing. And then I'll start grabbing the B string once I start doing the D7 flat 9. So slide. So I do a lot of different variations. Sometimes I grab like the, or I do the. So you can kind of play it however you want. Like I was playing this pretty freely, so I can't guarantee everything I'm doing is exactly what I played. But you know, like that's the kind of the spirit of rockabilly. It's not really a totally composed thing. It's a fun. It's like everybody's just playing freely. So the second half of the verse, I start doing some cool licks. So that what I just played is the first half, just to kind of hold basis of it. So after we get done with that, so I'll play the first lick that kind of do. So it's basically the same thing, just with that lick added in the middle. So that's in the middle of the G minor 7 chord progression. So we're starting here like we would normally. So it's kind of based on the blues scale, kind of a Dorian kind of thing, because all I'm doing is just hem-runs and pull-offs with the 3, 5, and 6th fret of every string here on the G, B, and E string. So I start with the 5 and 6 of the G string, and then grab the 3rd fret of the high E string there. So just in case, you know, it's a little bit of a string skipping thing, it's kind of fun to do. So from there, I kind of just do, and then you start pulling off on the E string and the B string. So this is the whole lick once again. So after the whole pull-off thing, then once again you come up. So you do the 5th and 6th fret of the G string, then come back up to the 3rd fret of the E string, then go back to the G string. So after this, then you'll do just kind of a blues scale, like pentatonic thing there. Then just get right back into it. So that's the first verse. Now, let's talk about the chorus.
Tough guy, like a really rough guy, just can't get enough guy, just so he's so buff guy. I'm that bad type, make your mama sad type, make you go from that type, might you lose your dad type. I'm the...
Now the chorus is basically just a simplified version of the verse. It's the same thing we've been doing so far, just without a lot of licks. So, I'll just play the whole thing. So we're doing the same thing we're always doing. The only thing to watch out for is then the 2 hits on the D7 flat 9, right at the end there. And then going right into the solo. And here's the solo. So now, let's go over the solo of the song. This is really fun to play. I spent a lot of time working on this, so it'd be really kind of wild, a lot of fun, and just really kind of a good way to get your fingers used to a lot of cool arpeggios. So, we start off with this big slide. So it's basically an octave slide. We're going to go back to our usual 3 notes here on the 3rd fret. top 3 strings, slide up an octave to the 15th fret, then grab the 17th fret here, and then we're going into this fun hammer on and pull off thing based on G minor pentatonic. So you kind of alternate between the pulling off on the 18th to the 15th to the 17th to the 15th. So, and then the last time we go back to the 18th fret on here, and then bend that up a whole step. So then the next thing we do, now we're at the C minor 7 part of the chord progression. I'll show you the basic kind of triad I'm outlining and playing around with here. So, we got the 17th fret of the G string, 16th fret of the B string, and 15th fret of the E string. So, see how I play around this chord shape now, and this is kind of how I was thinking. So, we come with this kind of cool slide in, and then a rake up, and then a lead in from the 14th to the 15th fret. I just kind of go up and down the chord shape, and then I, grab the 7 here. And then the cool part I start doing here, this one's pretty tricky. So after that, that's kind of challenging because you got to roll your finger back on that. So we're doing the 18th fret to the 15th fret, and then coming back down the triad, and then doing the 17th fret and the same thing. So when I play it, when I'm able to play it up to speed, I bend my ring finger all the way back to grab it. However you feel most comfortable doing it, you could probably use your pinky too. It's a little crowded here though, so it just depends. I like, barring with my ring finger. So that's how I do that one. And make sure you're swinging it all the way through too, like not. Make sure you're always swinging that. So after that, I start going into the diminished arpeggios over the D7, D7 flat 9, just to kind of give it that cool feel and cool sound. So coming out of this, like. So now we're doing this shape. It's like the C7, C minor 7 rather. Just move this finger back. So we're at the 14th fret of the high E, 16th fret of the B, 17th fret of the G. And then I'm going to grab a bottom note here on the 14th fret of the G string. So like I said before, diminished shapes, like this one, can be moved any 3 frets. So that's all I'm doing here. So you take this shape and what you do here at the 14th fret, do it at the 11th fret. And then I do a similar thing, just keep moving back 3 frets. So then you'll do this cool, like here, you're pulling off from the 11 to the 8 on the high E string. And then the 10th fret of the B string, back up. And then do the same thing back 3 frets. So that's going to now be at the 8th fret and 5th fret. So altogether that's. It's a tough one. So, slow again. So that's all the licks over the D7 and D7 flat 9. And then we come back for one last little bit of G minor. So coming out of. Let's start with that one. So we're going to be doing, just kind of think about your typical G minor pentatonic, and then do with a cool slide. So that's one thing that's kind of fun a lot of times in Rockabilly too, is instead of bending it, like I could have done, but sometimes a lot of what they'll do, and you'll see I do this again later too, is instead of bending it, I actually slide. So that's our first little lick here. So we're playing around the 6th, 5th, and 3rd fret of the high E string. And then just going right down your pentatonic scale with a little bend at the G string there. So that's, just starting here on the 6th fret of the B string. It's like a really quick bend up, and then so altogether that's. Now the next lick is a lot of fun. Now, this was just something I kind of randomly threw together because one thing I had always learned through my very basic knowledge of jazz is a lot of chromatic approaches. That's where the things like. So that's where that kind of stuff kind of came from my mindset, because you're always kind of leading into the notes. So I kind of took this a different way. I went backwards. So I more or less I'm just playing around just the typical G minor chord here, just with backing off notes in whatever direction. So what I'm doing, like I said, it's all based around that chord. So I'm going to do the 5th fret to the 4th fret on the D string, and then the 4th fret to the 3rd fret on the G string. Same thing on the B string, and then the high E string I'm going to do 3 to 2. So it kind of gives it this really funky, weird tonality, almost because it's somewhat outlining a little bit of an augmented chord. And then the last little, to cap it off. So that's just 3rd, 5th, 6th. Yeah. So let's talk about the second verse now. There's a little bit less guitar, but some more fun licks to play. Here's the second verse.
I like it when you take control, even if you know that you don't own me. I'll let you play the role, I'll be your animal. My mommy likes to sing along with me, but she won't sing the song if she reads all the lyrics. She'll pity the man I know. So you're a tough guy.
So for the second verse, the guitar lays out during G minor. So then it comes back with a volume swell during the C minor 7 part. So I'm just doing our typical, just fading it in. And then we have our kind of diminished D7 kind of shape here again. So let me try to play that a little bit cleaner. But it's hard to do really fast. So you kind of fade in with the C minor 7. And then the D7. So it's basically just these two shapes. The two we've already gone over. So your typical C minor bar chord there. And then your kind of diminished shape over the D7. It's 11, 10, 8. And then come right back up top for your D7 flat 9. Get used to going from here to there really quick before getting the volume swells down. Yeah, it's fun to strike it hard. That's kind of how I did it. And then on that last little hit that goes back into the regular verse, it's now the D7 sharp 9. So instead of this, we got this. So instead of the 4th fret on the B string, it's the 6th fret. So it's like this. Just kind of hit it hard those times there. So going into the rest of the verse, we're kind of back here. So that one's pretty straightforward too. So you're going back to the typical. And then I kind of do a bit of a slide up to our usual G minor chord there. So I'm really just grabbing the top two strings for the most part, so that's going to be the 3rd fret, 5th fret, and 6th fret. I do a little bit of a slide there. And then when you come back down, you're then hitting the 3rd fret and the 2nd fret. If you want to be really detailed, only the first chord I hit the G string. Then I try to avoid it every other time because you don't really need that. So I just decided to just do all the top 2 strings. And then go into the C chord, the C minor chord. This is where I get back into a bit of the hybrid picking. So that's going to be like a whole. So start off with like 2 all together. Get used to kind of playing back and forth with it. So it's 2 hits, then pick fingers. So I'm just kind of playing around with the 5th fret on the high E string here, just to give it a minor 6 sound, which I always like. And then this is a pretty tough one on the D7, so I'm doing this. I'm kind of outlining what I'm singing, which is like a. So you're keeping these 2 strings constant. The A string and the G string are both on the 5th fret, but then you're moving the D string notes. So I do, you can do this with your ring finger or your pinky, doesn't matter. Then I bar, and then switch around. And if you got a Bigsby, it's always fun to hit it at the end of these long notes. Yeah, that's probably how I played it. I screwed it up on the recording. So, that's the 2nd verse. Now we're talking about the 2nd chorus.
A tough guy, like a really rough guy, just can't get enough guy, just so he's so buff guy. On my bad type, make your mama sad type, make you go from that type, might seduce your dad type.
Now the 2nd chorus is pretty similar to the 1st chorus, but just a couple little variations in there. So, as always, we're back at the. Watch this. So, I just add a couple things in the middle, and then the last 2 notes are a little bit different too. So, we're chugging along. Now I start moving my ring finger down on the A string, just to kind of then lead into the C. So, then I lead up to the D. So, basically all you're doing is. So that's all you gotta kind of watch out for when you're playing the chords. So, 5, 4, 3, 3, 4, 5. So that's what you gotta look out for. So you're talking about moving the notes on the A string. So then the last 2 notes are just a little different voicing of the same chord we've been doing. So you do your usual. So now instead of doing, it's just a slightly higher voicing using just a different set of strings right there. So all you're doing is like your typical diminished 7 shape, which is 4th fret of the D, 5th fret of the G, 4th fret of the B, 5th fret of the E. And slide up. And then we'll talk about the 2nd solo. Okay, so now the second solo, I finally incorporate that cool like melody lick from Bad Guy, just now swinging and a lot faster in rockabilly style. So normally the riff is. So basically you're just playing around with, again, G minor, just throwing in the flat 5, which is cool. So in rockabilly it totally fits. And then for the C, you would just move it up accordingly to C. So basically what we're doing is this, I play it at the 5th fret of the D, and then the 7th fret of the G string, and then hit D, then the 6th and 7th fret, then go back to the 6th, and then hit the 8th fret of the D string, and then that's the whole lick. Then C, it comes right back after here. So I just move it up a string rather than moving it up here. So then I'll play it at the 5th fret of the G string, and then the 8th fret of the B string, and then play around the 7th fret and 8th fret, and then the 8th fret again. So. And then the D7 part is kind of cool too, so here's what I do. So now I'm starting to use finger picking a little bit, or the hybrid picking again. I always pick down and then use my fingers to go up. Actually, I do a little bit differently. So basically, these are the first two notes. So you're at the 7th fret of the G. 7th fret of the G string, and the 10th fret of the B string, and then go to the 7th fret of the B string. So you're just kind of bouncing back and forth. And I'm using my finger to play all the notes on the B string. And then I use two fingers to really get a percussive attack on this, outlining the dissonance of the D7. Get the tritone in there. That's the word I was looking for. Give it like nice 3 hits, really kind of smack on them. So altogether, it's this. So that's the first part. Then the second part gets a little bit wilder. This is a Brian Setzer lick I totally took and just put into this. So like I was saying before about not bending and just sliding, this is now where this comes into play big time. So after that, I could play it a little bit better. But, basically all I'm doing is instead of... So all you're doing is 3rd fret of the high E string on the G there, and then sliding from the 6th fret to the 8th fret, approximately. I mean, you kind of just go wild with it. So, kind of practice that. It's kind of tough to get used to. And then at the end, I just come up to the, typical part of the G minor chord we're always doing, so just adding the 6th fret of the E string in there. So, just have fun with this part because it's just... I gotta come in a little bit later with that. But basically that's the gist of it. And then you come into the C part. So I'm just playing around once again, just the 2 top strings, barring everything. So this would be 8th fret, 11th fret, and 10th fret. And that's the D part, which I'll get into in a second. So, basically I'm just kind of strumming along. And then stop again for the D. And then I'll come up again to the D7 shape, which is kind of acting as a diminished in a way too. So. So you're playing just your 2 strings on the 10th fret here, and then you'll slide up to 14 on the G, 13 on the B, 14 on the E. I'm kind of bouncing between the strings a little bit, like I said, it's just kind of a lot of free feeling things. It's not necessarily one thing or the other, or you kind of do what you feel. I was kind of just going along with it. I guess I have a bit of a tendency to kind of bounce between the strings. You can do it however you want, whatever you feel is right. So after that, oh yeah, so we get into this really fun. After that, we get into this really fun kind of octave sliding thing. Get your finger ready because it's gonna hurt. But so kind of like I was doing earlier, you're gonna be sliding a whole octave. So leading into it. So my finger's burning. Yours will be too because you got to slide really quickly. So I'm basically doing. I do this kind of thing like towards the end of it too. I try to like on the second time after that part, I'm trying to do this like strumming thing as I'm sliding up, like almost like a. So I try to do that. That's so fun because then the first one is just kind of straight. So that's how you get to that part. So then after that, I just kind of not slide, but I go then like almost into like this raging. So I'm just kind of outlining the C minor 7 thing, which is just your typical thing to do over that sometimes. So you're going to get the 18th fret and the 15th fret and then the 16th fret of the B string. And so then you'll come up one more time and then do a full bend, then come back down. So after your bend, then you got 17, 15, 14. And then I kind of just do this nasty like. So. That's another thing too, like as I'm building up a lot of these chords, I'll start grabbing the flat 9 as I go, but not necessarily immediately, like almost like you're kind of building it up. So I'll play that part slowly one more time. So. And then the last little lick coming out of it is. It's just based on the, just going up. So I just do an octave down. So that's going to be the 3rd fret and the 6th fret on the low E string. And then the 4th and 5th of the A string. And then do almost the same thing you just did. Just the D7 and then do the D7 flat 9. And then we're going into the beginning of the outro. So here's that.
The bad guy. The bad guy. I'm the bad guy. I'm the bad guy.
So the outro is now where we're going to halftime and just get this kind of like, I was almost thinking of like a, line of people swinging their legs out or some kind of funny, like the Rockettes or something. But you'll see on the chord progression, it's still the same chords we've been doing the whole time, but now it's just kind of based around the riff. So I'll play it and then I'll explain it. all I'm doing is grabbing the low G, and then grabbing the top 3 strings as usual. And then what I'm doing is just sliding back and forth from 2 and 3. So basically strum all the 2s and then slide to 3. Then the C gets a little bit more challenging. So I'll do the same type of thing where I'll play the C, 3rd fret of the A string. Now I'm not playing the whole chord, I'm just, trying to mute the D string with my finger and then playing the top 3. So this is where it gets a little bit challenging, you gotta really stretch, so I'll do the same thing, the C, and then the chord, and then. So I'm kind of like loosely strumming the chord, but like trying to really emphasize this string, because that's where the melody is. And then the D chord is something I think more or less like. That's basically. Yeah, that's what I played. So the D, 5th fret of the A string, and then just these top 3 notes of your D, typical like that kind of thing. And then just that's just gonna be the B and the G string. Our typical build up once more, and then now comes the outro solo, which you'll see here, and then I'll explain. So the outro solo is actually pretty similar to pretty much what I was playing in the intro. It just kind of climbs up different chord voicings. So this is how it starts. Back to our usual area. That last part of the G minor chord. So. So, let's break that down. So, basically, like I said, I'm just using the high E string as like a melodic way to lead into each voicing. So, just our typical thing, just going from the 3rd fret to the 5th fret, and then coming up to this voicing, which is your 7th fret, 8th fret, 6th fret, and then you take that voicing, and then just grab your pinky to hit the 8th fret up top, and then come up here, 12th fret, 11th fret, 10th fret, and then one last time, hit the 13th fret, so once I get up here, I do a bit of a slide in, and then hit the 9th again. Just keep adding that one note there. And then hit the C minor 7. So, I'll play that slowly one more time. Then from the C7, I'll play the whole part, then break it down. So, the C7 part, C minor 7, is fun. So you come down here to this voicing. That's your 17th fret, 16th fret, and 15th fret. And then I'll grab the 18th fret for the 7th on there. So that's where I'm going to be alternate picking again and kind of bouncing between. So just kind of practice that. I kind of slide in. So I'm using my middle finger and ring finger to grab those top 2 strings. So that's like just like watch how I do it, and then this is where it gets tricky. I thought this was pretty hard when I started coming up with this part. So once you get this part down, and then you're going to be at the 12, 13, and 13. And then basically all you're doing is switching back and forth between the 2 high strings on the 13th fret and the 11th fret. So it's a similar thing. So then once you're out of this section, then hit, and then we're going to come to a cool D7 voicing that I like, which is the 11th fret of the G string, 13th fret of the B string, and then 10th fret of the E string. Switching between the previous part and that can be kind of challenging, but practice it slowly and you'll get it. And then I add a little before going into the last lick. So this is like the whole thing. And then this is the last fun part with a kind of a cool diminished lick. So, we're going to be looking at this type of shape, which is what we've seen already, but I'll explain it again. It is the 5th fret of the G string, the 4th fret of the B string, and the 5th fret of the E string. And I slide in from the 2nd fret. So then I'm actually picking the top 2 once again with my fingers, so it's going to be like pick on the G string, and then ring finger on the E, and middle finger on the B string. So, as I've been saying, with diminished stuff, you just go up every 3 frets. And that's basically what I'm doing just to climb up to the G minor thing there. So you start at the 5th fret, 8th fret, then 11th fret, then 14th fret, and then chord. So that's, once again, just our typical G minor at the 15th fret. So I'm sliding pretty quickly as I go. This is the only deliberate one. Like here, how quickly I'm going between, like that kind of thing, versus. So, and then getting your kind of fingers to move the right way and independently too is a good thing to practice. So. And then I kind of grab the whole chord, hybrid picking once again. So that's that lick, and then this is how the song ends. So you'll come in from. That's just a callback to the lick from before, so that's going to just start on the G string. Just based around that lick we were already doing. And then I just do like a little. So that's going to be a 6, 7, 6. And then 8, 5 on the D string. So you're doing. And then I do these cool chords at the end of the song. Do a D augmented and then do a G13. And then strum like crazy. So these are the. I do in 3 notes first. I do the 4th fret of the D, 3rd fret of the G, and 3rd fret of the B. That's your D augmented, but just the 3 notes. And then the G13 is pretty cool. So you have, it's almost like doing your G minor, but instead of doing these 2, you're moving up these. So it's going to be the 5th fret of the D, 3rd fret of the G, 5th fret of the B, and 5th fret of the E. And then you have all that and just strum like crazy. And that's how you play my rockabilly version of Bad Guy by Billie Eilish. Thank you.